You're listening to episode 15 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, we're talking about how to effectively change your habits. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and we have a really important show for you today for anybody who is struggling with implementing habits. Now, by the time this show comes out, it's going to be a couple weeks into January, and my guess is that there's a lot of you out there who created some goals for 2020 that might already start to be getting a little shaky. Maybe you've already given up on a few and it's not even the end of January yet. So I wanted to talk about goals and habits today because really the whole purpose of this show in general is to help you learn the tools and strategies that you need to use food, fitness, self-care, and self-love to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. And the fact is that in order to live out your bigger God-given purpose, you need to be disciplined in your habits. And so I want to talk about habits today because I think we underestimate the power of habits. And sometimes we forget that when we set goals, we need to also make sure that we're identifying the habits that we want to implement in order to reach the goal that we've set for ourselves. So before we get into the show for today, I wanted to do my first listener shout out. Now, these listener shout outs are going to be the people who leave a review of the show on iTunes. So if you want to be shouted out, then head over to iTunes. The link is in the show notes for this episode, and you can leave a review. Let me know what you think about the podcast, and I will shout you out if I see it. So this shout out is for somebody named Ginger in Progress, and she says, I have been waiting for a podcast that explores health and faith like this. What a blessing. Laura has so much to share about how we can become healthier, but more importantly, why we want to steward our health in the first place. She is an inspiring leader, and I know this podcast will encourage women in a powerful way. Well, thank you. And I really appreciate you leaving that review and the fact that you're subscribed to the podcast. And it's so, I'm just so grateful to know that I'm inspiring you and that you see me as a leader, which is something that I have been working on, hopefully becoming for years now. And this podcast is another opportunity for me to practice that leadership. So thank you so much, Ginger in Progress, for sharing your review. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's get into the episode for today. Now, I wanted to make it very clear that this episode is heavily inspired by the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm going to link to the book in the show notes if you want to check it out. And the reason why I decided to talk about James's concepts from Atomic Habits is because I actually heard him on a podcast with one of my business inspirations, Amy Porterfield. She has a podcast called Digital Marketing Made Easy, and it's one that I listen to pretty regularly, maybe not as regularly as some of the other ones I've listened to, but it's definitely becoming more of a regular podcast for me in the last couple of months. So Amy interviewed James Clear on her show, and I was listening to what he was talking about when it came to habits. And I've actually had his book on my to read list for a really long time now, probably close to a year at this point. And I even actually I bought CEUs for the book as well. As a dietitian, we have to get CEUs every 5 years. And I will also link to the CEU course for that if there's any professionals listening that want to potentially use this book to get the CEUs that they need for their 5-year check-in. But basically, like I said, this book has been on my to-read list for a while, and I heard the interview with James and Amy on Amy's podcast, and I just loved the little action steps and little ideas that he shared on the show. I'm sure the book goes into a lot more detail, and I do plan to read it and to start using his work to inform the way that I work with my clients and the way that I structure my programs even. But I wanted to share with you what I learned from James, not only from that podcast episode, but also he's got a great blog that I was looking through earlier today. And so the reason why I'm being very clear that this is an inspired podcast is because something that I want to be really careful about on this show, as well as my blog or any content that I produce, I want to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due. I definitely come up with a lot of stuff myself, but then there is a ton of stuff that I pick up from different people in not only the health industry, but also the business industry, the behavior change industry, all the different industries that I am exposed to on a daily basis that then inform the way that I work with my clients and the way that I talk about things on this show. So like I said, I want to make sure that I'm always giving credit to the people that inspire the work that I do. And for this podcast, heavily inspired by James Clear. So definitely go check out his book. And I may be talking about it again in the future once I actually get to read the book. So what I wanted to talk about today is habits. Really, what is a habit and how do we create a new habit or eliminate an old habit? And as James talks about in his book and on his blog, there are 4 steps that go into building a habit, whether we do it consciously or not. So a lot of the habits that we have are actually completely unconscious. It's not something that we had to set a New Year's resolution for or create a goal for. It's something that we actually it's either built into us as humans, just as a survival mechanism, or it's something that we have developed in our modern society based on different influences. So some examples of more automatic unconscious habits are things like if your phone is in your pocket and it buzzes, you take your phone out of your pocket, you press the screen button or whatever to open the phone screen, and you look at whatever alert created that buzz. Now, if you had no idea what a cell phone was, you didn't even know that the cell phone was in your pocket, you probably wouldn't think to grab something out of your pocket when you felt your leg vibrate like that. But since we've been conditioned to know that that buzz means that our phone is actually alerting us to a notification, and that notification is something that we might be interested in, it is something that creates this unconscious habit. Another example that James uses is the idea of walking into a dark room. The first thing that we usually do is flip on a light switch. So especially if you're in your own house and you know where that light switch is, as soon as you walk into your house or to a dark room of some sort, you immediately go to switch the light switch on. It's not something that you have to think about. It's not something that you have to motivate yourself to do. It's just completely automatic because you're in a dark room, you want light, you know that flipping a light switch is going to create that light, and that's the habit that you do. So you can see how some habits can be extremely automatic, and really everything that we do is more or less a habit in some way, shape, or form. Of course, we can learn new habits and we can eliminate old habits, but at the end of the day, our behavior is largely driven by these habits, whether they're conscious or not. Now, every habit has 4 different steps, and I'm going to go through those. And again, this is what James talks about in his book, Atomic Habits. The first step is a cue. A cue is what triggers your brain to initiate a behavior with the hope of a reward. So with the light switch example, the cue is the dark room. You walk in, you see the dark room, and the hope of the reward is that you'll have light so that you can see where you're walking, and you'll be able to see what's in the room, and you'll be able to do what you needed to do when you walked in that room. The second step is a craving. A craving is a desire to change your internal state and experience something positive or reward. And it's important that we notice this concept of the desire to change your internal state. As an example, with the light switch, you don't have a desire to flip that light switch. In and of itself, flipping that light switch literally does nothing for you. But the desire is to maybe feel safe or feel calm or just in general feel like you have accomplished something that will allow you to do what you were going to do by having the light on. Because if you didn't need the light, why would you even flip the light switch? So I know it's a little bit of a silly example, but we have to think about our internal state and how our internal state is driving a lot of our actions and behaviors because we desire to feel a certain way, whether that's safety, happiness, eliminating discomfort, whatever it is, it's an internal state that we want to affect. All right. So that'll come back in later when we talk about health-related habits, but I just want to make sure it's clear that the craving is not about the external environment. It's about your internal environment. The third step that goes into building a habit is the response. Now, the response is the actual habit that you perform. This is not necessarily an action that you can see in the outside world. It could actually just be a thought. And this is something that a lot of times our thoughts are not things that we're really paying attention to. Sometimes our actions are things that we're doing that we're not even paying attention to. Things like biting our nails, or like I know I tend to run my hands through my hair. I have a lot of hair, and so I'll run my hands through my hair and some hair will fall out. And my husband is always, I don't want to say complaining, but he's always commenting to me about asking me if I can not throw my hair on the ground. And for me, it's like 100% unconscious. It's just something that, like I said, I'll run my hand through my hair and I'll just like drop the hair on the ground. And when you have as much hair as I do, it starts to accumulate. So that's a super vulnerable share. It's super gross, but any of my ladies out there that have a lot of hair, they, I'm sure, know what that feels like. So like I said, some of our actions are unconscious. A lot of our thoughts are unconscious, but the response is the actual habit that is expressed after that cue and craving are triggered. Like I said, in the light switch example, that's the turning on of the light switch. Now, the fourth step that goes into a habit is the reward. And that means that there's something positive that results from the response. And that positive thing we hope is going to change our internal state. I say we hope because we don't always get the response that we want. We don't always actually get the reward that we think we're going to get, but the reward is something that can strengthen the habit that you're creating, because the more we get rewarded, the more that we start to associate the cue and the craving with the actual habit or response. So I hope that makes sense. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways that we can use examples to explain this. Some of them are with those more automatic habits. Some of them are with positive habits. And then some of them are with negative habits. And when I say positive and negative is really just an interpretation. Somebody could argue that, I don't know, eating a cookie, which I'm going to give that as an example in a few minutes, eating a cookie could be a negative habit for some people, but other people might interpret that as a positive habit. Maybe it's somebody who is actually trying to gain weight and they know that if they eat cookies, it'll help them reach their goal. So like I said, the actual behavior or habit isn't necessarily positive or negative. It's just something that you get to decide if it's something that you want to encourage and build and strengthen, or if you want to eliminate it. So let's use that cookie example, because I think it's something that eating food that we enjoy, there's nothing wrong with it. Like I said, eating a cookie is not good. It's not bad. It's neutral. There's a lot of positives that come from eating a cookie, and then there's also negatives that can come from eating a cookie. So different people will interpret the idea of eating a cookie in different ways, but let's just attack this from the idea that eating a cookie is not something that you want to be doing all the time. So the cue in the situation is you see a cookie. Maybe you're in your kitchen and you had just made cookies for your kids the other day and you left a pile of cookies out on the kitchen island. And when you walk into the kitchen, you see the cookie. Now, again, that cue isn't actually something that creates the response immediately. It's something that has to create a craving first, because just to give you an example, maybe you made oatmeal raisin cookies and you think oatmeal raisin cookies are gross. So you don't actually have a craving to eat those cookies because you actually would find them to be unappealing and unattractive or undesirable. So the craving has to happen for you to actually have the response. I just want to make sure that's clear. So having the cue in and of itself is not the habit. So like I said, in this situation, the cue is that you see a cookie on the kitchen island. And then the next step in this habit is that a craving is created. Maybe they're chocolate chip cookies and they're warm and they look delicious and you love chocolate chip cookies. So that craving for that cookie is really just you desiring the taste of the cookie, the experience of eating the cookie, the satisfaction from eating the cookie. Maybe there's some a positive emotional response that comes initially from eating the cookie. So there is something that is appealing to you, and there's this possibility or hope of a reward from the potential of eating that cookie. So again, the craving is not actually the action. It's what drives the action, assuming the craving is strong enough and the desirability of that action is actually there. So the third step in this situation is the response. And so the response could be that you go and eat a cookie. It could be that you eat one cookie. It could be that you eat 5 cookies. Maybe the response is that you don't want to eat a cookie. So there's a lot of different ways that you can respond in that situation. But let's just, for argument's sake, say that you do go over and you eat a cookie. Now, in this situation, the reward is that you satisfy your desire to enjoy a cookie. Again, maybe it makes you feel happy. Maybe it makes you feel comforted. There's something positive that you get from that response of eating the cookie. Because you got a positive reward from the action, now enjoying a cookie has been associated with the cue of seeing a cookie. So in the future, the craving is going to continuously be strengthened because you've experienced a reward that creates a positive change in your internal state, even if it's just short-lived. So I know there's a lot of people out there that struggle with overeating, binge eating, that kind of thing. Maybe you eat 5 cookies and while you're eating those cookies, it feels really good and you're getting some kind of positive reward from it. But as soon as you finish eating those cookies, maybe your stomach hurts or you feel bad about yourself. Like there's some negative stuff that can come afterwards. But we have to be very clear that habits are only strengthened by some kind of positive change in your internal state, even if it's only short-lived. And the reason why I want to harp on this is because I have a lot of clients who they'll tell me they don't know why they engage in a certain habit. And when I ask them what's the benefit or what's the reward that they're getting from that habit, sometimes they're not even totally clear about what the reward is. So it's really important, if you are engaging in regular habits that are not constructive or not things that you want to be encouraging, you need to be very clear about what is the benefit that you're actually getting from engaging in that action, because all actions that we take have a perceived benefit in some way, shape, or form, even if it's not aligned with the goals that we have for ourselves or our values or our desires. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because like I said, sometimes habits like eating a cookie, it can be very obvious. Yeah, of course, cookies are delicious. That makes sense that that's the reward. But some people might be thinking about other habits like, maybe over consuming alcohol. And you notice that when you're drinking, you're not happy and you feel sick. And there's a lot of negatives that come from drinking too much alcohol. You might think, well, what's the reward? I don't feel happy when I'm drinking all that alcohol. Maybe the reward is you're numbing some kind of negative emotion. Maybe the reward is if you're in a social situation, you feel less uncomfortable or less nervous, like whatever that is. It's really important to explore what the rewards could be, because like I said, that's going to be really key to changing the habit, whether that's creating a new one or eliminating an old one. Okay, so speaking of creating habits, let's talk about the 4 steps to creating a new habit or eliminating an old habit. And like I said, this is from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'll link to his book in the show notes so that way you can go check it out and read it. I'm going to be reading it too. This particular information I found out about on his blog and then in that podcast interview with him on Amy Porterfield's show. So I'm sure that the book itself has so much more detail about this, but I just wanted to share with you what I was learning and to give you some framework to think about. So I'm going to go through each of these 4 stages using an example of a new habit to create as well as an old habit to break. And that way you can see how these 4 stages or 4 steps can be used in different ways in order to either build habits that you want or eliminate habits that you want to get rid of. The 2 examples I'm going to use are the new habit of walking every day for 30 minutes. Now, you don't have to do that habit. This is just an example. It's a habit that I've personally decided to focus on for the first quarter of 2020. Now, of course, I would love to be doing it all the time, but I want to be making sure that I'm not overcommitting to too many goals in the year of 2020. I'm actually using a planner called the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt. That's another one that I found out about through both, I think James Wedmore might have mentioned it, and I know for sure that Amy Porterfield mentioned it on her podcast. So those 2 entrepreneurs that I follow and listen to their podcast, they talked about this Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt, and he has you go through this process of identifying the different goals that you have for the quarter or the year. And it's either a big achievement goal or it's a habit goal. And walking every day for 30 minutes is one of the habit goals that I picked that I want to be working towards in the first quarter of 2020. Now, the old habit that I'm going to use as an example to potentially break is the habit of eating sweets every day. And I know I'm always giving these disclaimers. If you want to eat sweets every day, that's totally fine. You can do that. There's nothing immoral about eating sweets every day. Honestly, I tend to have a little bit of something sweet on a regular basis, but for some people, they want to eliminate that habit or maybe at least reduce it so that they're not overeating sugar on a daily basis, since maybe they don't feel their best when they eat a lot of sugar. So anyway, that's the old habit that I'm going to use as the example. All right. So we have the new habit of walking every day for 30 minutes, and we have the old habit of eating sweets every day. Okay, so step 1 for either creating a new habit or eliminating an old habit is to make it obvious. The easiest habits to maintain are the ones that are basically impossible not to notice. To use a very common example, teeth brushing is probably one of the habits that the vast majority of us in the United States and really just in the modern world in general, most of us do that at least once or twice a day, right? It's a habit that is ingrained into us from very young. Maybe we're a toddler when we first started. And for most of us, it's a habit that doesn't really require any thought. It's an automatic thing. Now, teeth brushing, there's a couple of different cues that are very obvious to us that can help us do that habit without having to think about it. One is just the fact that your toothbrush is visible on the bathroom counter. I know if you're like me, I usually clean up at the end of the day and get ready for bed and all that. And I wash my face and I brush my teeth, and my toothbrush is right in front of me on the bathroom counter. It's very clear and obvious to me. Now, the other cue that is pretty obvious, I would say, and a lot of times, at least for me, is one of the big triggers for teeth brushing, is the feeling of an unclean mouth. So maybe you're getting ready for bed and you had dinner an hour before and you can taste the food in your mouth, or you have that film on your teeth. That feeling is something that can be considered a cue for us. And that cue creates the craving or desire for a clean mouth. And that clean mouth feeling where, it's minty fresh and your teeth feel really clean. All of that is something that is pleasurable and desirable for us, maybe, just for our own internal happiness, or maybe you're married and you know that you don't want your breath to stink in front of your husband. So that's something that, it would potentially benefit your relationship, and that's a reward for you. So like I said, the easiest habits are the ones that are impossible not to notice. And as things get less and less obvious, they get harder for us to be cued to do the habit. So this is really attacking the stage of the cue, really making sure that for any habit that we want to implement, that the cue is almost impossible to miss, if not basically impossible to miss. And then if it's a habit that we want to eliminate, we do the opposite, which is to make it invisible. So you want to get rid of that cue. You want to hide that cue. You want to make it so that cue never crosses your path. So in the example of walking every day for 30 minutes, there's a couple of different ways that we can make that a more obvious cue. One would be to leave your sneakers out, maybe in front of the door, or maybe you put it on, like on your car seat or something like that. Just something that is going to be in front of you. You see the sneakers and you can't miss it. My cue that I think works the best for me is I have a dog, and my dog is, he likes to go for walks, and he'll either bother me, like I was working yesterday on my computer at the kitchen table, and he comes over and like literally puts both of his paws into my lap and is like nudging my arm and making it really hard for me to work. So super sweet. I love my dog, but it's something that basically he is annoying me into walking him, or that I guess maybe he doesn't think it's annoying. It's encouraging me into walking him. So that cue is basically impossible for me to ignore. It's something that I wasn't thinking about necessarily, but my dog comes over and pretty much just puts it right in my face. Another thing that I've done personally, and this works for a lot of people for this particular goal, is to wear a smartwatch that reminds you to get your steps in. Like I just got an Apple Watch for Christmas, which was awesome. Thank you, hubby. And so one of the things I wanted with the Apple Watch is the ability to track my workouts, track my movement throughout the day, because working on the computer a lot, and just I get into the habit of sitting too much if I'm not paying attention. So I really like that the Apple Watch reminds me to get up and to move around and to get in some movement and steps, that kind of thing. So the smartwatch is actually something that cues me into doing that walking. And finally, another thing that I've personally done in order to implement this new habit is build it into your calendar. I don't know if you're like me, but I basically live and die by my calendar on my computer. It's on my computer, it's on my phone, it's on my Apple Watch now. It's basically something that I have access to almost 24/7. And that calendar pretty much guides my whole day, my whole week, as maybe not like some of my free days like Saturday or something like that, but definitely during the week, I have a very specific calendar. And even though there is some flexibility, I try my best to follow it to a T. And so if I build in a walk with my dog for 30 minutes into my calendar, it's much more likely to happen because I'm going to get alerts on my computer. I'm going to get an alert on my phone. I might even get an alert on my Apple Watch. It's when I go to look at my calendar to see what I have to do today, I see it there. So again, it's making it more obvious, and it's making it harder to avoid the cue or to miss the cue to do that action. Now, like I said, the opposite of making it obvious is making it invisible. And in the example of eating sweets every day, how do we make those invisible? One way would be to put the candy away. Maybe it's in a bin on the top shelf of your pantry. So you have to get a little step stool to get it out. Or, I've definitely seen some little devices out there where you actually put like a lock on it, and there's like certain different ways that you are allowed to unlock it. So again, making it harder to actually access in your own home is a way to make it more invisible. And actually, some of those I would say are going to be a little bit more related to step 3. But if we just think about the actual hiding of the candy, and hiding is kind of, I know it's a little bit of a weird word to use because we can't necessarily hide it from ourselves, but it's really just putting it in a place that we don't see it. So we almost forget about it. I know for me, things like candy, chocolates, ice cream, that kind of stuff. We have it in our house, but I really just don't see it very often. And it's not something that I'm thinking about. So half the time we'll have like ice cream in our freezer for months and I totally forget that it's in there. So out of sight, out of mind. And so that's a really important way to help reduce the likelihood of the habit that you want to eliminate. Now, better yet, other than hiding it in your own house, better yet is just don't bring it into the house. Something like candy. I know back in October when we had Halloween and it was like in our house, we had like bowls full of candy because we had maybe 6 kids come to our house. That bowl of candy, if we had just put it out on the countertop or if we had left it in the house, there is a higher likelihood that I would have eaten it. And honestly, the kind of candy it was like, Twix and that kind of stuff, like nothing amazing, nothing super high quality. I really didn't want to be eating it. And I knew that if it was out and cueing me to be interested in sweets, there would be a higher likelihood of me eating it, even though I didn't really want to be eating it. So I actually gave it to my husband to take to his school. He's a teacher. And I said, just like use it as like a reward for your kids or something. We might have even thrown it out if we didn't have that option of bringing it to my husband's school. So if you are struggling with just putting something away and putting it out of sight, then ask yourself, is it something that you even want to have in the house? There's nothing wrong with keeping sweets out of the house and limiting them to special occasions, maybe when you go out to eat, or if you really want something, you can always drive to the store to get it. But if it's not in the house whatsoever, then it's far less likely to cue you to desire it and to crave it. So out of sight, out of mind, whether that's hidden somewhere or just not in your house at all, is the best way to make something invisible or something that's really not obvious to you. Step 2 for creating or eliminating a habit is to make it attractive. The more appealing a habit is, the more likely you'll do it. And this is something that I had used with the cookie example. Eating a cookie for most people is very enjoyable. But if it's a cookie that you don't like I use oatmeal raisin as an example. I actually really like oatmeal raisin, so it's not a great example for me. But I know a lot of people that don't like oatmeal raisin cookies. So if that was the cookie that was on the countertop, some people don't enjoy that. And there's literally no desire to eat that cookie because it's not attractive. So if doing the habit is attractive, it's much more likely that you're going to do it. So to use that 30-minute walk habit example, there's a couple different ways that I came up with that would make this more attractive. One option is to walk somewhere with a view. So I know we have a lake right next to our neighborhood that I think it's like 3 miles from our door to door to go around it. And it's not exactly like the most beautiful scenery I've ever seen in my life, but it's nice. It's nature. It's, the lake and there's animals and birds, that kind of thing. So that is a more attractive place to walk than just around our neighborhood, even though our neighborhood's totally fine. But I know, as an example, I used to live in Bondi Beach, Australia, which is right outside of Sydney, and they had this cliff path that went along the ocean, and it was just like the most beautiful walking path I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not really a big runner, but I was doing a lot of running there because it was just so beautiful and enjoyable. And I saw dolphins and humpback whales and people surfing and just seeing like the area in general that I was living in. It was beautiful. So that made the walking and running in Australia extremely attractive to me. But like I said, you can find places locally. It doesn't have to be a famous beach in Australia for you to enjoy it. Another way to enjoy 30-minute walks is to go with a friend and make it social. So I know for me, I really like to take walks with my husband when he's around and we can do it together. Even just this past week that I'm recording, we walked around the lake twice, once together, and then once my parents actually came over and we did the walk again the next day. And that made it social and it made it more enjoyable than doing it alone. Another thing I tend to do with walks that makes them more enjoyable is either listen to music or a podcast or some kind of audiobook while I'm doing it. I typically do podcasts just because I really like having a short, like 30 to 60 minute thing that I can listen to while I'm walking. Maybe it takes 2 walks to get through the whole episode, but it just gives me a little bite-sized nugget of learning that I can experience while I'm walking. And for me, that's enjoyable. So those are 3 things that make walking more attractive to me. I enjoy walking in general, but for sure, if it's with another person or if I have a podcast that I'm listening to, or if it's in a beautiful location, I'm much more likely to want to do it. Now, the opposite is to make the habit unattractive. And again, I mean, this is a little tough with the sweets example, but I can use our Halloween candy as an example of this. I was thinking about the candy itself, and even when I would eat it and taste it, I'm like, ugh, this stuff's like not that good. I mean, I know maybe some of you think that's blasphemy, but basically things like the Twix or the little like fun size Snickers, that kind of thing, they were just okay. That was one thing that helped me not start eating too much of that candy, was actually asking myself, is this Twix even that enjoyable, or am I just eating it because it's there? So that's a way to make it unattractive. There's other things that you can do to potentially make a habit unattractive. But for the candy example, it's really just thinking to yourself, is that candy actually something that's really that enjoyable? Or is it something that you just have in your brain that it might be enjoyable, but when you actually engage with that habit, it's really actually not that enjoyable and it's not that attractive. Step 3, which I had kind of hinted at earlier in step 1, but step 3 is to make it easy. And what it means to make it easy is to minimize how many steps it takes to complete the habit. With the walking example, something that I like to do, which I feel like this could be just for comfort and enjoyment purposes, but I like to tell myself that it's for the possibility of working out more spontaneously. But as an example, to make it easier to go for a walk, you can wear your workout clothes and your sneakers all day. Like that can be the first thing you put on in the morning. And now you don't have to go change if you're going to take a walk. So, that can go for working out as well. If the first thing you do in the morning is put your workout clothes on, you don't have to go change later to go to the gym. And so that can make it a little bit easier. Another way to make walking easier could be to buy a treadmill, so that way you can walk inside your house no matter what the weather is. You could also walk around your neighborhood, so that way you don't have to drive anywhere, since the driving to get somewhere to go walking is an extra step. That's something that I think sometimes with working out in general, minimizing how much effort it takes to even get to the gym can sometimes be helpful. I say sometimes because I know for me, I don't know. We'll have to see. My husband and I might potentially put together a garage gym, but for now I do work out at a gym that's only like 7 minutes away, maybe. I do train with a trainer that's 30 minutes away, which is a little bit more complicated to get there, but our gym that we work out at is very close. So it's not something that's too hard to get to. But if I really didn't want to go there, I could get something to have at the house to do at home. And then that removes a step in order to engage with the habit. The opposite of making it easy, of course, is to make it difficult. And this was something I was kind of hinting at before when I was talking about to make it hidden. But with the candy example, the harder it is to get to that candy, or the harder it is to eat the candy, the less likely it is that you will actually do it. So like I said, if you don't have any candy in your house, and in order to eat candy, you have to drive to the grocery store or walk if you live somewhere that's walkable, that's going to be a much bigger barrier to you actually eating the candy than if you just have it in your pantry and you can just go grab it. So that's why not having something in your house can make it less likely that you're going to do it, because you have to actually put in a bunch of effort to even get to do the habit that you're trying to break. So that's just an example of making it more difficult, but there's lots of different things that you could do to make things more difficult. As an example, like if you're trying to cut down on your TV watching, you could hide the remote. And so to actually watch TV, you have to get up and use your fingers on the TV itself to change the channel. And that's kind of a little bit less desirable than just laying there and using the remote. So there's lots of different ways that you can make not good habits or not desirable habits more difficult to do. And that can make it start to be less likely that you'll actually do the thing that you're trying to stop doing. So the fourth and final step is to make it satisfying. Now, this is related to the specific reward that you get from the habit, because that reward is really what drives that habit loop that we were talking about before. The more reward you get from the habit, the more likely it is that you'll continue to do it. Now, the tough thing is, for a lot of the goals that we have and the habits that we have to implement to reach those goals, it isn't always immediately obvious that it's enjoyable. Like, for example, budgeting. Doing a budget, sticking to a budget, definitely not an enjoyable process. It's not fun to not spend money, that kind of thing, in the most part. I mean, if you find it fun, cool, good for you. I wish I found it fun. But choosing to not buy something that you want for most people is not a pleasurable experience. But we can think about long-term reward and think about how we can actually connect the habit to something that we expect to have in the future, even if it's not a short-term immediate reward that we might get if we weren't to do that habit. So to use the walking example, there's a couple different things that you can get immediately as a benefit from walking every day for 30 minutes. One would be increased energy. I know I feel more energetic after a walk, mental clarity. A lot of times, if I'm feeling a little creatively stifled, if I have to prepare for a podcast episode or I'm working on a project for one of my group programs, if I need a break, taking a walk is a great way to get that break and to get some mental clarity and to just lighten the stress levels a little bit. It's also enjoyable to be outside, depending on the weather and depending on your scenery. If you do make it a social event with your friends or your dog, that can be enjoyable as well. And I know another reason why I really like walking every day is because with all the sitting that I'm doing, if I sit and I don't walk, I do tend to have things like joint pain or pelvic floor issues, that kind of thing. So when I'm walking on a regular basis, I find that I have reduced pain and stiffness in my body. So that's another reward that I get from that habit, is reduced pain. And again, it's not always immediate benefits. I know some of the ones that I was focusing on were the immediate benefits, which is always going to be much more motivating than long-term benefits. Unfortunately, that's just human nature, that we like to be rewarded ASAP when it comes to the habits that we're implementing. But delayed gratification is something that is really beneficial for us to develop that ability to work towards a future reward as opposed to an immediate reward. And so remembering what the future reward that you're working towards, that goal that you have, that's another way to make it more satisfying, even if you don't have that reward as soon as you finish implementing the habit. Now, the opposite of making it satisfying is to make it unsatisfying or to add some kind of cost or consequence. So with the candy example, when I was thinking about, do I want to eat this candy? Do I want to get rid of it? What do I want to do? One of the things I thought about beyond just the fact that the candy wasn't that enjoyable was the possible consequences of eating that candy every day. So as an example, maybe I would put on some extra weight that I didn't really need from a health perspective. Maybe it would create digestive distress. Maybe it would affect my blood sugar and that would create energy dips. And I don't want to feel like I'm running on sugar all day. Maybe it would lead to cavities because I was eating this sticky, sugary candy. There's so many different potential consequences that could come from eating a lot of candy every day that it really didn't take me very long to figure out that eating candy wasn't something I really wanted to get in the habit of doing. So, of course, this is something that needs to resonate with you. Maybe you don't care about cavities or you're not worried about cavities, but the idea of putting on extra body fat that isn't actually necessary for you to be healthy, maybe that's something that you don't really want to experience. So that could be a consequence that you think about and say, you know what, eating candy every day might cause me to gain weight and I don't really want to gain weight, so I'm going to skip the candy every day. Now, I just want to make it super clear because I know there's a lot of different opinions about weight loss, weight gain, all of that stuff, body image. I don't want you to be shaming yourself when it comes to this satisfying or dissatisfying or consequence type of thought that you're having about the habit. This isn't about shaming yourself for doing it or telling yourself that you're a bad person or anything like that. It's just about being honest with yourself about the consequences of your choice. Like I said, with the candy, I will admit one of the things was, you know what, if I eat candy every day and it's super easy to overeat and it's usually something I would be eating on top of my meals, I'll probably end up gaining weight, and I don't need to gain weight. That's not going to benefit me in any way. And, you know, that other consequences of gaining weight would be that I have to buy new clothes, and then that's a financial cost. So those consequences are real. There are things that do happen from the choice of eating a lot of candy every day. And that was something that I didn't feel any shame. Like, I still ate some candy. I didn't feel like I was a bad person for eating it or that I was a failure or anything like that. But I did have that rational conversation with myself and thought about the consequences of continuing to eat candy the way that I'd eaten it around Halloween. And I knew that the consequences were not something that was desirable for me. So again, it's not a shame-based conversation. It's not you telling yourself negative things about yourself. It's just being honest about what the potential consequences are and letting that guide the decisions that you make. So I hope that makes sense. And what you can do as an action step is to think about any of the habits that you're potentially struggling with. Like I said, we're a couple weeks into the new year. I'm sure many of you that have set goals for yourself have hit some kind of roadblock at this point. The thought is that if it's a goal that is any sort of big goal or big change in your life, that it's going to take some major change and it's going to take some new habits. And humans are not good at creating habits that are not easy and enjoyable and desirable and obvious. So what I was going to say is that if you are struggling with any habit implementation, you can ask yourself these 4 questions when it comes to the new habit that you're creating. So 1, is it obvious? Is it very clear to you, like the cue for that habit and what time of the day you do it and what's going to remind you to do it? All of the things that are going to create that reminder and get into your actual like field of view or get it into your brain that you're going to do that habit. So is it obvious? Is it attractive? Maybe you set a goal for yourself to go to the gym and you're doing workouts that you actually hate. And if you hate the workout, that's probably not something that's going to be super desirable to continue. So you need to start thinking about maybe there's some different ways of exercising that you would enjoy more. Maybe Zumba would be more fun because you love dancing, something like that. So is the actual habit attractive, something that you desire doing, regardless of what the actual outcome is? Number 3, is it easy? Are you making it easy for yourself to implement, or is it hard to implement? Like I said, if you're going to start a new workout habit, having workout equipment at home or having a gym that's super nearby, or maybe using the gym at your work, something that does not take extra effort to even get to the place that you can do the habit is always going to be easier than if it takes more steps to do it. Now, I shared with you that I drive 30 minutes to get to my gym to train with my trainer once a week. It used to be like 10 minutes away, and I used to train 2 to 3 days a week with him. So I've had to cut back on my frequency with him, not because I don't want to train with him anymore, but just realistically driving an hour each time I want to work out is completely just unreasonable, and it's not easy to do. It's very difficult to do that. So that could have been an opportunity for me to stop working out altogether. But since I had already established training with him as a habit, because I was training with him for like 4 years before we moved, it wasn't something that I was just going to like let go of. It just had to change so that I could continue making it as easy as possible. So if you're struggling with it being easy, just start to think about, are there ways that you can make it more easy and reduce the number of steps it's going to take to actually implement that habit? And the 4th question is it satisfying? Is there a very clear reward that you're getting from the habit, whether that's an immediate reward, a long-term reward? Ideally, both. Like I said, a lot of our goals are things that we're not going to get immediately. You don't go to the gym once and suddenly you can deadlift 300 pounds or something like that. We know that it's going to take time, and time is a necessary factor when it comes to achieving your goals. But we need to make sure that we're also identifying short-term benefits of the habit, because at the end of the day, human nature is that we like short-term benefits. We like immediate gratification, and we need to make sure that there's some level of clear, immediate benefit and enjoyment and satisfaction from the habit itself, even if we know that it's going to take months or even years for you to hit the goal that you're trying to hit by implementing that habit. So like I said, if any of those questions are a no, you can brainstorm some ways that you can increase the ease and enjoyability of the habit. You want to make it easy, you want to make it obvious, you want to make it attractive, and you want to make it satisfying. And like I said, some habits in the moment aren't very enjoyable, but the outcome is rewarding, even sometimes in the short term. So to use an example, washing dishes, not really fun. I don't enjoy washing dishes. And I would, if I could take that off my plate for the rest of the year or the rest of my life, I would not be sad about that. However, the immediate reward of dishwashing is having a clean kitchen. And I feel physically satisfied or emotionally satisfied when my kitchen is clean and it looks nice and it's a nice atmosphere and it's cozy because it's not a mess. So that's the immediate reward from doing the habit that isn't necessarily attractive or easy to do or fun. But I know that the result is going to be something that gives me pleasure and gives me satisfaction. So just keep that in mind, that not all of your habits have to be fun in order to be valuable and worthwhile to you, but it certainly helps if you can make them more fun. All right. So I hope that was helpful for you today. Like I said, going to say it one more time. All of this was inspired by James Clear and his book, Atomic Habits. So check out the show notes for today's episode if you want to learn more about his work and get his book. And I hope that this was helpful. Let me know in the comments below this podcast post on my website, or if you want to DM me on Instagram. Let me know if there was anything that you had an aha moment about, or if there's anything that you realized about your own habits that you're trying to build that needs to be adjusted or addressed. I would love to connect with you guys and hear more about what you're learning as we continue to publish these podcasts. And you can always subscribe to get alerts every time we have a new one. We have some great interviews coming up. So definitely go to iTunes and get yourself subscribed to the podcast because you don't want to miss the episodes that we have coming up in the next couple of months. All right. Well, it was great hanging out with you guys today. I will look forward to seeing you here next time on the Fed and Fearless podcast. And I hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone. Hey everybody, Laura Schoenfeld here again. I'm so excited to announce that I now have openings for new private clients to begin working together in 2020. I have worked with hundreds of clients over more than 6 years on a variety of health conditions. My areas of expertise include hormone health and fertility, adrenal dysfunction, gut health, and immune dysregulation. I'm also well-versed in sports nutrition and enjoy helping recreational and semi-professional athletes maximize their physical performance. My functional medicine training and client experience, combined with my compassion and realistic view of health, makes me a well-prepared partner for you in your journey towards better physical, mental, and spiritual health. If you're looking to build a relationship with a qualified health consultant who takes the time to get to know you as a unique person, then you'll love working with me as your own personal functional nutritionist. The first step to becoming a client of mine is to book a functional nutrition strategy session. On this 30-minute strategy call, I will provide a review of your current diet and lifestyle approach, clarity on what's holding you back from making progress towards your goals, and I'll help you come up with a personalized game plan for optimizing your health. If at the end of this call we decide it would be a good fit to work together on this plan, we'll have the opportunity to discuss my consultation packages and services, and even to get started working together for a longer-term partnership so that way you can experience lasting results. To book your session, go to lauraschoenfeldrd.com and click the menu button that says Work With Me. You can learn more about how I work with clients and book your strategy session from there. I look forward to meeting with you soon.